in a broadcast. So we'll start coming in. Welcome to those of you starting to join the webinar. We're just waiting for everyone who's supposed to be here to get in, and then we will start. I think I may start the housekeeping now, and then people can just pick it up as they join. And if anyone has any questions as they go along, they can put them in the Q&A. So when you join the meeting, you should be on mute, and we would ask that everyone remains on mute, please. It just helps with the clarity for the speakers that it's mainly background noise that we want to get rid of. So if you're, the speakers will mute themselves when they're not speaking, and as an attendee, we will unmute you if you need to speak. We will be taking questions and answers at the end of the session. So if you do have a question and you would like to pick it up at the end, please pop it in the Q&A section, and we will pick those up at the end. Because of the nature of this webinar, if you have a question that you don't want published, if you just put in the title confidential, and then who you'd like to ask that question to, if that's relevant, we can take that offline. So if there are questions that you would like to take offline, then please do post those as well. We will be sharing Lisa, Joe and Nick's details in a follow-up email, and they are all over the slides as well. So if you want to contact any of them separately with anything that you don't want to sort of discuss within the event, then please do. We have also got other events going on in this series regarding various business issues, various subjects that we are getting input from businesses they want to hear about. So please do keep up to date with us. Visit the Trading Through Coronavirus Hub and our website, and you can pick the events up. Also, just to say, if you're having any technical issues or you just want to ask a general question about something or an observation, then just pop it in the Q&A as well. Just one more thing from me. So the series of events we're running, which I've already mentioned, is via our Trading Through Coronavirus campaign. The campaign was set up at the beginning of lockdown to help businesses just kind of cope and have somewhere they can go to get support and help. And sometimes just reassurance. So if you haven't already, please do visit our website and sign up to the Trading Through Coronavirus Hub. It's really easy to navigate, and it has some really good resources I'm reading. That's what I'm just looking to the side on how to. So the how-to section is really useful because that is rated in the order in which we're getting people asking about stuff. So at the moment, grants, employment law, the things you would expect to be quite popular, but for your business it's quite good to see as well if there was something you hadn't thought of that you need to look at. There's also blogs, videos, podcasts, event listings, case studies, and then we also have a series of events to support businesses trading internationally through and beyond lockdown as well. So the resources are amazing. We've got really good feedback. We've surveyed other businesses. So if nothing else, when we're working in this slightly more isolated environment, it's a good kind of check-in to see what other businesses are doing as well, and that you're not the only one that is having the issues and the sort of challenges and maybe possibly triumphs that are going on in your business. So that's enough from me. Our first speaker today is Joe. Joe works for JBP, and they're one of our initiative members, and we work really closely with them across a host of issues, and they have been really good. Particularly, I've worked with them more when we have our initiative meetings. And so with no further ado, I will hand you over to Jo.
Morning, lovely to see everyone. Thank you for the invitation, Natasha, to speak on behalf of JBP. We are in an ever-changing world, aren't we? And at the moment, the whole emphasis around mental health is something that, you know, creeps into our everyday lives, whether we're familiar with it or not. You know, there's a lot of data around, there's a lot of information being broadcast every day about, you know, what we should be doing, how we should be feeling, you know, and how other people are feeling. So part of my presentation today is to talk about some of those things in relation to the workplace. But I'll just give you a little bit of background about me first, just to set the context. In my previous life, I was a nurse. I trained as a nurse in the 80s. In the good old days. And the last 15 years of my working life in the NHS was as a Macmillan nurse. So I was caring for patients in hospital with cancer. I did my cancer degree at the Marsden Hospital in London, and then did my counselling training at Bristol University back in 2000. So the theme of mental health and psychological care has really run through my career. I also did some work with Jonathan and David Dimbleby for Dimbleby Cancer Care as a nurse consultant there, looking at research into cancer and palliative care. And latterly, I've worked as the director of a small counselling organisation, mental health organisation based in North Somerset. And I'm still working with them now, but running a research project looking into mental health provision for the under 18s. And that's a massively growing area of need. We do know from research that's been published that, you know, the majority of people, of adults who have mental health problems, will have had experience of that by the age of 14. And many of those children have never had support. So it's an area of care that we're looking at. But I also freelanced for an organisation called Breast Cancer Now, doing some work with them, and I'm also a mental health first aid instructor. So that side of things comes into play very strongly when we're talking about mental health within the workplace. So essentially what I want to do today is just give you some pointers or indicators for supporting your teams with regards to mental health in the workplace. And as I say, you know, some of this is it's largely stepping into the unknown, because, you know, 3 or 4 months ago, when people were going to work and were in the workplace a lot, that needed one set of skills. Now that lots of people have been furloughed, some people have lost their jobs, and some people obviously are now returning to work, we're now looking at a different set of needs, really. However, the art of conversation is something that will encompass all of those scenarios. So what I've done is I've written some blogs that will go up on the JBP social media sites that Natasha referred to earlier on. They're due to go out over the next few days, and this is really just a snapshot of the information I've provided for those blogs. So if we take into account what it's like when you know, when people experience mental health problems at work, we know that that's a significant group of people. I mean, 1 in 4 in the population generally will have a recognised mental health condition. And a study in 2016 showed us that, in fact, that equated to 16 million people in the UK with a mental health condition. So it's not something that we can sweep under the carpet. It's out there, it's every day, and it's very, very present. And part of the issue at the moment is that we are living through, obviously, the pandemic. It's a crisis. It's seen as a threat, and essentially what it's done is it's caused trauma in lots of different ways to all of us. So for some of us who have been shielded, like myself, and I know Nick, one of our other speakers I was talking to the other day, has been shielded too, you know, we're suffering with things like social isolation. Seeing people on screen is great, but it's not the best. And also, I think for people who, you know, are uncertain about going back to work, who are fearful about going back to work, they have some very real worries about, you know, what it's going to be like and how they will be supported by their line managers and by their teams. So essentially, you know, this little synopsis of hints and tips, if you like, will hopefully help to guide you if you find yourself in a situation where you need to be, you know, talking sensitively to a colleague about, you know, about what's been going on. So the first point that I want to bring is really to plan what you're going to do. And I know that sounds really simple, but planning your meeting with that person, planning what you're going to say, how you're going to say it, and the environment that you're going to use is key. So it's a bit like when I was younger. I think my parents used to say things like preparation is 9/10 of, you know, the overall effect when you do decorating. It's, you know, it's a similar thing to that. If you plan well, the rest of the conversation should actually follow quite naturally. So think about when that meeting will be. It might be that you do it before lunchtime, for example, so that actually once the meeting is finished, you and your colleague might be able to go off and get some lunch or go and get some fresh air. And I'm sure Lisa will talk to us a little bit later on about, you know, the importance of fresh air and exercise, you know, in reducing stress levels. So maybe plan before lunch, make refreshments available for people when you're nervous. You get a dry mouth, and there's nothing worse than sitting there not being able to speak because your mouth is dry. Making sure that you're in a place where you can't be overheard or overseen by anybody else. There's nothing like an unexpected, you know, event that captures people's imaginations to start office gossip. So make sure you've got privacy and confidentiality built into your planning. Also, just make sure that you turn off the notifications on your phone when you're with somebody. There's nothing more irritating than having your phone pinging when you're trying to have an in-depth conversation with somebody. And likewise, make sure the lid of your laptop or your computer is down. Give that person your attention and make sure that actually you are with them in the moment. And that brings us on to the second part, really. And probably, you know, a very significant part of the conversation, which is what your colleague will remember. They won't know about all the planning that you've put into making this an okay contact. It's what goes on in that meeting that they are going to remember and take away with them. So the second point is about being in the moment. And as I say, if you've planned well, this should actually follow quite naturally. So making sure that you're receptive to what people are saying, making sure that you've got good eye contact with that person, make sure that, you know, you're not distracted. A nice way of actually being in the room, you know, is to make sure that there's space around you and that there's air flowing. Open a window, you know, or if you've got a fan, just put fan on gently in the background. It all creates that feeling of being able to breathe. And breathing is something that I want to talk about just very briefly. When we're anxious and when we're nervous, we forget to breathe. So as, you know, as a line manager who's about to go into a meeting with a colleague that might be quite sensitive, you might be feeling quite a lot of anxiety about that yourself. You don't want to get it wrong. You don't want to upset somebody. You want to make sure that it's all right. Just as much as your colleague will be feeling that as well. So it's a really nice starter to be able to say, let's just get comfy. Let's just make sure we can breathe, because you're going to get the best out of somebody then. When you don't breathe well, your oxygen levels go down, your carbon dioxide levels go up, and that does very odd things to your body and to your mind as well. So it means that you can't think straight, and it means that you potentially get fidgety, crampy, you know, and you're not relaxed. So taking time to breathe is crucial. being in the moment as well also means being able to respond to what that person is telling you. And you know, it may very well be that they know their story really, really well, but they're skipping between things that don't really make much sense. So it's perfectly okay to slow things down, bring them back to the here and now, and say, I was really interested in that bit. Can you just tell me a bit more? Maybe make some notes to help things flow a little bit better. Always keep an eye on things like your GDPR, please, if you're making notes with people, and you know, be very clear about what happens to that information. But that can sometimes help to make sure that you've covered everything, and if you need to refer to paperwork or documents, make sure that you have them available so that you're not distracted by trying to find them when somebody's mid-flow. If somebody gets angry, that's okay. People do get angry, and they're not necessarily angry at you. They're angry at maybe what they've experienced. It might be out of frustration that they're finding it difficult to communicate what they mean. Sit with it, and never ever, please never say, oh, I know just how you feel. None of us know how anybody else feels. It's all, you know, life is an individual experience. How we live our lives is individual, and we must never take that away from the person that is trying to convey their story. So be in the moment, be present, breathe, absorb, take it in, and that brings us to the final part of holding a sensitive conversation, which is being able to summarize what you've heard. So you may have sat there for 5 minutes, you may have sat there for an hour and 5 minutes, but what's really important is that whatever messages that person has tried to convey to you, you convey back that you've understood that and you've heard that. What's key then is what you're going to do with that information, and that's where you need to work collaboratively with somebody. Ask for clarity. Don't ever be afraid of asking somebody to give a bit more information, or, you know, go back over something. But, you know, balance that with not being nosy either. You know, as people tell us their stories, we have sparks flying off in our brains, thinking, oh, I wonder what that meant, and I wonder what she did about that, and who said that. If that information isn't key to what you're trying to do with the conversation, you don't need to know it. It's not a social conversation, it's a business conversation, which is being held for, you know, the purpose of both you and, you know, and your colleague. So good summary, good planning then for where you take that next. It might be that you can manage some of that stuff internally. If you've got mental health first aiders at work, that may be an avenue for you to use as support. Slight caveat to that, if you do, please make sure you look after your mental health first aiders. It's a subject very, very close to my heart. It's something that I know from experience, and I know from what people have said to me, that those people will absorb that person's story, and that's known as vicarious trauma. So they can actually live that trauma through themselves just from hearing it from somebody else. So you need to make sure you've got good care for your mental health first aiders. And if you haven't got the resources within the business, is that person worth investing in terms of buying in resources from outside? And there's lots of support out there. Not all of it costs. There's quite a lot of voluntary support out there and charitable support. But it does mean that hopefully together you'll be able to plan a way forward. And essentially what that means is that you could potentially see you know, less absenteeism with work, more presenteeism, better reputation for you as a manager and your company or your business. And you really start paving the way. You know, we do know from, again, some recent research that only 1/4 of managers actually have training in mental health issues, and that's not enough. So if you can be anything, be an advocate for starting those conversations and moving them forward. Simple, hey? I'm sorry, Natasha, I've lost you. I can't hear you.
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry. I was on mute and Lisa was trying to tell me I was on mute. I'll say all of that again because I could listen to your voice all day. I feel so calm now. Thank you. Those were really good, concise tips. It sounds really easy when you say them. We can all go away and do them now. And I think when you say those things, I read at Business West, all managers have mental health training. And I think when you work in an organization where they do stuff like that, you just think everyone has it. So
yeah,
I think it does highlight how lucky we are that we are, equipped to be able to speak to our staff and support them and signpost them to where they need help. So our next speaker is Lisa. And Lisa's from Westport. Again, Westport are one of our Chamber and Initiative members, and we've worked with them across a host of events and activity. Westport want us all to be active, and they have some really good initiatives that you can subscribe to in your organisations. We've done quite a few at Business West, and I said to Lisa when we joined the call, my children's school are doing a school challenge. So there's lots of really, really good activities and things. If you think, oh, I'm bored of going for a walk every day, good challenges, you get a bit competitive. So I'll hand you over to Lisa.
Thanks, Natasha. Yeah, just really grateful to have this opportunity, really, to, as Natasha says, really talk about the importance of physical activity and sport during this period. As Natasha referenced, we've got lots of information on our website. So outside of this topic, I'd really urge you to have a look. As you said, we've got lots of support to how to stay active in general during this period, specifically school-based activities, and also work that we're doing with community organisations as well about how physical activity and sport can be used as a social tool during this period as well. So yeah, please take a look at some more of our information, how we can work with you. Particularly about this topic, this is really, really excited to be able to be part of this conversation, because I think sometimes we underestimate the power of physical activity in terms of maintaining good mental well-being. And certainly during this period, it's increasingly important. And the fact that the government have actually acknowledged and are encouraging us all to be active, during that period of strict lockdown, we were able to go out once a day and take part in physical activity. So that was, music to our ears to have that sort of endorsement that actually this is a good thing to be doing, not only for our own physical health, but especially for our mental well-being. And that's, what I really want to sort of take this time to talk about. There is lots of evidence out there, lots of studies and research has been done that shows how physical activity can help improve your mental health and maintain good mental well-being. We know that by being physically active, you are releasing endorphins. They're the feel-good hormones. You generally feel better when you have taken part and have got your blood moving around your body, you've done some physical activity. We also know that in terms of managing stress, if you're able to do some physical activity, it releases cortisol, which helps combat that stress that you go through. So in terms of managing any response to stress, whether that's a short-term thing you need to relieve, just being able to do some physical activity at that point can really help you get through that stressful moment. But also in terms of longer term, if you can build physical activity and can become a habit, it helps you maintain a good mental well-being to cope with the daily stress that we're all sort of under, and especially through this period. So it is a really good coping strategy that I think we all need to sort of have in our kind of toolkit that we can come back to and use when we need to. In terms of what can we do and how can these things help, I think just going out for a walk is so important. I think sometimes we underestimate the power of being able to go for a walk. Again, it's doing some physical activity, but if during this period you're able to go for a walk with somebody else, and certainly taking this back to the workplace when we're out of restriction as well, the quality of a conversation that you can have whilst walking side by side with somebody can be so powerful. I appreciate that there's many times where conversations have to be held face to face and you need that eye contact, but also the less threatening way of having a walk where you are side by side, where you haven't got eye contact, very often enables people to actually open up and talk about something that they're going through. And I think within a workplace setting, that can be really, really powerful as a peer-to-peer support mechanism as well, not only as a sort of line manager and employee engagement. So I think that's something that we really want to advocate for, that actually think about how something as simple as going outside for a walk really can help manage that kind of that conversation, and can really get people to open up. So for some organisations, you know, this is quite a cultural change, and I think that's something as well that we need to work with and support employers to think about the culture that they have within their organisation, and do they have a culture that actually encourages people to take part and be physically active. You know, anecdotally, some of the businesses that, you know, we've worked with and supported over the years, you know, I've heard line managers sort of say to me, well, I can't be seen to be doing yoga in my lunch hour. What would my team think? Now that, to me, you know, that's the problem. You know, your team should be thinking, that's great that you've gone and done a yoga session in your lunch break. We need to be having breaks. We need to be taking time away from our desks. We need to have that outlet, and through physical activity to be able to release that stress and have that chance to just move away from our desks. Many of us spend, you know, far too much time sitting down in a sedentary position. A recent study showed that on average we're spending 9 hours a day in a sedentary position. Now that's too long. We need to be making sure that we break up that time that we're sitting down. So being able to have a proper break during the day, being able to take a proper lunch break and doing something like physical activity is really positive. We also know as well that in terms of just your cognitive functionality, if you do some physical activity, it actually stimulates, you know, your brain function. So you will actually be more effective. So when line managers saying, well, I'm too busy, I can't take time away from my desk. Well, actually taking a 10-15 minute walk and then coming back, I guarantee you will then be more effective in that next hour to 2 hours than if you hadn't had that break. So the excuse that's often used that, you know, time is the barrier and they haven't got time to do physical activity, you know, I would certainly challenge that. And again, that comes back to the culture within the organisation, and is there strong leadership that has engineered that culture that actually it is okay to take part in physical activity. So this really does needs to happen at the highest level, and I think those organisations that have got senior managers and people in the leadership positions that are seen to be taking a break and are able to build active travel in and around their working day, that's a great, you know, message to give to the rest of the employees that this is a good thing to be doing, and it is positive for all staff. So, you know, that's really the biggest message that we really want to get across with this. So I think during this period where many of us working remotely, it can be harder in some ways. You know, we get out of bed, we have our breakfast, we're sat down in front of our desk. Many of us have lost that active travel element, even if it was just walking from the car park, from your car to your desk, even, you know, walking to the bus or whatever. Many of us have now lost that element of active travel in our day. So I think, you know, come back to Joe's point about trying to plan some of these things in as well. And I've certainly had to think about this. There's no reason why we shouldn't, you know, we should now think about planning a 15 or 20 minute walk before we sit down at our desk in the morning, because that would have been time that we would have spent traveling anyway. So I think it can be easy to think, oh, I've got more time to actually do all my work and I can be sat down now from 8 in the morning till whatever at night. Well, actually, we still need to challenge that, and we still need to make sure that we are making breaks. So certainly at the start and at the end of the day, think about what travel time would you have had, and can you make and build some activity into those periods. I've already talked about making sure that you take breaks. And even if it's that's just standing up, doing a little bit of stretching and just coming and sitting back down. That's good. It's giving you a break from your screen. You know, I sit here, I'm looking out of a window, so I'm constantly sort of moving my eyes from focusing on the screen and then looking further away. That's really important as well, that we're making sure that we're just having that kind of break, because with all these Zoom calls as well, we're having a lot of screen time. So if we can get outside, brilliant. If you're not able to go for a walk, if you've got a small area outside, a garden or a yard or something, you're just getting some fresh air is all really, 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 really valuable. I mean, the general message is we just all need to move more. It isn't about having to put on sports kit, put on your trainers and go, you know, for a 5K or 5K run. It's just about making sure we're getting up and moving our bodies in whatever way we're able to do so. So I really, you know, do hope that during this period, some people will have had an opportunity to start thinking about this a bit more and start building some of these elements and for them to become habitual, so that when we are back in our more normal workplace setting, that there are some of these things we will be able to carry on, and they will become, and hopefully can become, part of the norm, and that we don't maybe go back to some of our old habits, really. So I would encourage businesses to really think about how they can support their staff and encourage activity during this period, but also once we return to the workplace. In terms of what support we're able to offer, as I said, there's lots of information on our website. We have a specific section about active workplaces and the work that we're able to do in terms of supporting businesses. There are some great resources out there and lots of good tips and ideas. We're also able to run webinars specifically looking in more in detail around physical activity for good mental health. We held one a couple of weeks ago, which was really popular. We've actually got another one on July the 8th coming up, which is free to anybody to attend. So Natasha will send the information out to everybody post this webinar. So I'd really encourage employees and you know, line managers to really come and on that webinar, where we get the chance to explore in more detail about the real positive benefits that physical activity can bring. But if any business would like to have a more detailed conversation with me, I'm very open to doing that. So yeah, please get in touch. Okay, thanks, Tasha.
Thank you, Lisa. That was really good. And I do encourage you all to go and look at Westport's website. It's got some really good information on. And whilst we're all working remotely, it really encourages you to get together in your teams and as organisations to get involved in getting a bit more active. So thank you very much. Right, next we have Nick. Nick is an experienced-based inspirational speaker who comes very highly recommended, and I think it's such an important thing to be able to speak to people based on your own experiences and help other people with their mental health. And I heard a really good thing the other day on the radio where someone said, for those of you who don't think that you need to pay attention to your mental health, or it's not about you, everyone with a brain should be interested in mental health. So I'll hand you over to Nick now to speak to us about his experiences.
Thank you very much, and hey everyone, nice to meet you all. I'm doing that a lot recently, meet you all. I feel really naked today. For those who've seen me, I know there's some attendees that I recognise, that the beard and the cap, I promise you it is me, I promise. So my name is Nick Elston. So I'm an inspirational speaker on the lived experience of mental health. The important part of that for me is the lived experience part, and I'll come on to that. Just to give you a little bit of a backdrop, not the full blurb, so don't worry. I've definitely been on the receiving end of mental health challenges, but also mental illness challenges, and there's a clear and a big void in between those two things. And I think that's the first challenge that we have, is distinguishing and getting the message across to organisations especially, that there's a difference between mental illness and mental health, actually, and as was just alluded to so well, that mental health is a thing that we can positively, proactively take on every single day in each of our own lives. So my experiences through childhood, I had obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. Now, that's really commonly known as a thing, but what's less commonly known was what it morphed into. So back in the day, I'm 42 now. I look a little bit younger without the beard, but I'm still 42. That the awareness and the solutions just weren't in place to fix OCD for my example. So it morphed into generalized anxiety disorder, GAD. So we're through teen and adult life. GAD is really interesting because it's less commonly known, but statistically more common. It's where you run on high anxiety, like that hamster wheel of anxiety, where you kind of run and run and run and run. And as soon as that one thing stops, something else jumps in and takes its place. Also, the really debilitating thing about that is actually it changes our behaviors in terms of we give ourselves away to appease situations and people. We seek our accountability and worth in different situations. We become, by default, people pleasers. And actually that becomes our default mechanism. But what they don't tell you about kind of things like GAD is it takes the same energy to destroy us as it does as a catalyst to go forward. So the same nervous energy actually can be the key to your success by your own definition. The problem with that, and school's a brutal environment for sure. So actually my way of dealing with that was to be in every clique, to be everything to everyone. And I took that approach, which worked brilliantly, into my corporate life. And the reason why people get to that point of burnout or breakdown or meltdown or whatever you want to call it, everyone's got a different word for it, and everyone experiences a different thing. So for me, the reason I got to that point was because I was running on nervous energy consistently. So actually it did drive me to be successful in my corporate life. It did drive me to do everything, but interestingly, that it wasn't me. And what I mean by that is that I was masking myself. I was trying to be what people wanted to see in me. I was trying to be what situations demanded of me, but I sure didn't damn show myself. Because when I showed myself, my narrative told me that I was going to get shot at. My narrative told me I was going to be judged and not loved and dismissed. And it's really interesting. A lot of the industries I work in now, like law, financial services, are very much areas in construction, areas of business that they who leave first loses. Those kind of mentalities that thrive on that kind of culture. And as Lisa alluded to, it's the culture changes that we need to really implement. So the masking was the first thing. But the second thing is that I didn't schedule recovery. And the commonality between every other person I've experienced, the same as I've experienced, is that they will fill up their diaries with all their work stuff, they'll fill up their diaries with all their home stuff, but they don't feature in their own lives. They don't actually schedule every single day the recovery and the recharging that you need to be able to go again strong tomorrow. And what that is different to everybody. And I didn't do those things. And 7 years ago now, I had my kind of breakdown moment outside of a networking meeting. I'm all right now, I promise. I'm going to be good. But I had my moment, and I'd done that thing where we kind of shake people's hands. Remember that? We used to shake people's hands and say, like, how are you? I said, I'm great, thanks, how are you? And I wasn't. I was feeling rubbish. And you don't say that, especially being a 6'4", 20-old stone ex-bearded guy. We didn't say that stuff. And I sat in the car and I basically just stopped. It was like a machine shutting down. It wasn't an angry thing at all. And interestingly, it wasn't a painful thing. Most people think that feeling pain is the worst thing, but it's not. It's feeling nothing. It's living under a haze. That to cut off feeling hate, you cut off feeling love, and to cut off feeling bad, you cut off feeling good. And you can't have one without the other. And that's kind of the defense mechanism. But that's the reason why I got to that point. I'd lost hope, or the hope of something better. And I'd become very frustrated with not being able to implement the changes that I knew I had to make. My environment at the time was the same as my environment now. The one thing that was out of place was me. So that's where it started for me. And for the Harry Potter fans in the room, it was like the boggart in the cupboard, the thing that I kept in for so long. What would it look like if I started to speak about this stuff? And I did. 2 weeks later at the same event, I stood up and I spoke about what had happened 2 weeks before. It's a terrible talk. I was shaking and crying and everything. But that day changed everything for me, because not only did everybody in that room queue up to give me their support, so my narrative was completely wrong. Secondly, that everybody queued up to give me a hug. I love hugs. I'm really missing hugs. And the third thing is that the dynamic shifted. It suddenly wasn't about me anymore. It was about everybody else, because everybody else started to share. People that I've known for years started opening up about PTSD and grief and loss and abuse and all these things that we carry around, but we just don't talk about. And that's where I truly discovered that the truth is liberating. That's where I truly discovered that lived experience has an amazing part to play in our mental health, individually and professionally and personally, in every sense. And that's why I decided never to go down the solution route, interestingly. So the more I spoke, the better that I became, the stronger I became, but also it helped other people. It started as a cause, which turned into a business by accident. And then my business, Forging People, which came from the line of my talk, we can either let our adversities and challenges that we experience in life define us negatively for the rest of our days, or we can choose to allow it to forge something better, to forge something powerful, to forge something beautiful that didn't exist without you going through your stuff in the first place. And for me, that's where it all starts to make sense. So my place in the world, and the thing I want to share with you, is that lived experience to me is crucial when it comes to engaging people in solutions. So lived experience is the vehicle that takes individuals and organizations from the problem to the solution, but is not the solution. And I know my place in the world of mental health, especially in the professional environment. There's a lot of people alluding to be able to fix people, and actually I don't sell a solution, I sell engagement. To the extent of, I will go into factories, for example, where predominantly the stats are a little higher, high male environment, predominantly over 40, predominantly blue collar environment, that I increase their engagement by 80% on a whole workforce by delivering one talk. It's amazing the power of being able to tell stories. Storytelling has been a powerful thing since the dawn of time for us, but we don't harness it because we're so scared of showing vulnerability. But also to boost momentum in wellbeing initiatives. That's all I'm doing. I'm not changing anything or give something different to you. I'm boosting engagement in what you've got going on already. So for me, there was a client I was working with who works in the trades, shall we say. Their usual wellbeing initiatives attracted 30 tradespeople from around the country. I tried a different way. I tried the lived experience way. I'm not a details guy. So I did a hand-to-face video, 40 seconds from Paddington Station. I've done it on the fly and just said, look, I'm going to be doing this talk. It's going to be about anxiety, but it's going to be a lot different to what you're used to. I'll see you there, and cheers, bye. And that was it, kind of thing. And 580 people signed up for the meeting, for the wellbeing session. So we actually did a week of stuff in the end. That's the power of just letting go of our fear of vulnerability. When we practice vulnerability on a daily basis, we become bulletproof because nobody has anything on us. All of our stuff's there, and we can showcase that to the rest of the world. So things like for clients last week, I was running call days. So I work a lot with contact centers. So their teams who are working from home at the moment, they will get a slot to phone me and just have a chat. And then I will signpost them to either their employee assistance programs, to their mental health first aiders, whatever they may be, because the truth is that people will tell me something that they wouldn't even tell their GP. That's the crazy thing. So my place is, and actually they're very comfortable with engaging with solutions once they've kind of had the chat with myself, sharing my stuff, because they know I've not got an agenda other than to truly listen. Essentially in life, people just want to be heard and they want to be understood. And if we can fulfill those two things to anybody, most of the time they will find their own way forward. The problem is, as humans, we feel this need to fix people. Unless we're professionals, they're not coming to us to be fixed. They're coming to us to be heard, just truly and actively heard. The coaching element of what I do came by accident. The best things that happen to me have always happened by accident. I built rapport and bond and trust with people, and then we started working on that kind of one-to-one basis, but the methodology is still the same. And I think kind of that's what I want to leave you with at the moment, is that whoever you meet right now in life, personally or professionally, they're in one of three camps. They're either in acknowledgement mode or survival mode or evolution mode. So acknowledgement is that we need to accept that where we are now is brutal. There's no way of dressing it up. Professionally, in terms of financially and health, it's brutal. And it's only when we acknowledge exactly where we are can we start to move on to where we want to be. And then survival for me is then, right, how long can we survive? What we have, we hold. How are our foundations in place? So again, the first thing I did with this kind of situation 10 weeks ago was, okay, financially, how long can I stand? Mortgage breaks, loan breaks, all the kind of stuff, the business, how's the business looking? And actually, it's only when I kind of worked out the true picture of that could I then go into evolution mode. Then that's the weird bit, because evolution mode is exciting. Because 10 weeks ago, none of my business is online. Today, all of my business is online. So actually that process of evolving, it's been exciting. And actually the introvert in me is really loving this, to be honest. That's a whole different presentation. But the point is that that's what we can do when we put our minds at, but we need to move on from acknowledgement. So by working out where somebody is right now, that's where you can start to help them. And as has been said already, that is actually initially the challenges I was hearing from were people on the ground level. But that went, after about 4 weeks, it then moved up to the mental health first aiders, to the line managers, team managers, employers, people that look after people, because, as has been said already so well, is that people go into those roles because they either have previous experience of challenges themselves, or they have a real passion to help people. The commonality in that is that they are more sensitive, they are more empathic, they will take on the burden of other people. So who does look after the people that look after people? And I think that's a really important question that's been raised a few times on this call already. So again, it's really worth knowing. But for me, I think I'm a country music fan. You can tell by the picture on the wall. Country music fan, finish on a quote. So every storm does run out of rain. We don't see it at the time. And actually, sometimes we need to know that everything you've ever kind of survived or thrived through, you've come through that. But sometimes it's people coming to us. But just remember, they're not coming to you to be fixed. They're coming to you for hope, or the hope of something better. And if we can actively listen, if we can actively signpost, that's our only responsibility as I see it. We know we've done all we can, and they will go and find their own way forward. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Nick. I hope today has helped everyone see that what we were trying to do with the webinar today was just to, in obviously the limited amount of space of time we have available, is to show that mental health isn't just, you're not just going down one road to get there. If you think we've looked at 3 very different elements of mental health and how we can support our employees. I do have a question that from myself that I would like to ask Lisa, Nick and Joe. From speaking to businesses and us doing our events and people just kind of anecdotally chatting, I think what a lot of businesses have said is that when it's time to go back to work, because I've spoken to people and they've said, oh, I was really looking forward to going back to work, but then when it kind of came to it, I got a bit nervous and I started thinking about it a bit more and thinking about being close to people. And when you run a business, even if you've got 4 people, there's going to be 4 different emotional reactions to coming out of lockdown. And as a business owner or as a manager, that's going to be quite difficult for us to sort of navigate, because everyone's not going to be the same. You know, some people would be chomping at the bit to get back, sat at the desk there, and other people are going to be really, really nervous. And that's, you know, the dynamic of having to manage all of that and not turning it into an HR issue, because it's very, you know, the line is getting finer by the day, isn't it, between how we're kind of supporting our staff's mental health and doing the right thing. Have any of you got any kind of words of wisdom or that you think could help us a bit?
Yeah, so it's a great point, and it's difficult because, like you said, there is no one playbook for any of this. Let's face it, we are all making this up as we go along. Some educated punts and some not educated punts. But the point is that I think taking away assumption is a really powerful thing right now. A lot of us go with bigger picture in mind, and actually we haven't got that right now, because even the world's greatest minds don't know when this is going to end, how this is going to look. And it's the same on an individual level. So for your example, that it's not assuming how people are going to react. Even if we knew them before, a lot of people are acting from a position of fear at the moment. You cannot tell a nation of people to stay home and save lives for 10 weeks for it not to have an impact coming out. And because it's kind of changed our conditioning. So for me, it's all about keeping it human, is to deal with people on a very human level, to have compassion and empathy for where they are right now, and understand that actually they may not be acting the way they did before. So that's just kind of my 2 pence worth.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Nick. Joe or Lisa, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Nick's point is really clear, and you know, I work from a humanistic perspective when I'm working with my clients, which means that, you know, we are all in the world together, and you know, part of our role as, you know, humans is to relate in a human sense. So I think having an awareness of, you know, some of the effects of what's happened to people, having some skills, very simple skills, to actually just be able to listen to what people are saying, and also making ourselves aware of what support is out there for people. So it doesn't take 5 minutes really to tap into Dr. Google, mental health support, or support through coronavirus or whatever, and you'll bring up a whole host of things that will be able to guide people. I guess the difficulty is that if you're looking at it from a corporate point of view, if you're looking at it from a business point of view, you have to have very clear messages in place about what your what your core message is, if you like, about how you look after your staff. And I think it's great to hear from you, Natasha, that a lot of the managers that you work with have had mental health training, but actually a lot of people don't have it, and it's sometimes very hidden, the whole approach to mental health within the business sector. People do feel vulnerable, people do feel ashamed if they can't manage, and I think there has to be very clear communication channels that are designated for people to have their voice, and this is the biggest issue. Like Nick said, like Lisa said earlier on, we all want to be heard. We all want our story to be heard. We all have a take on things. Some days are going to be better than others. If somebody is really, really struggling, then they probably shouldn't be at work in the first place. And it's about recognising when people need to be at work and when they don't. So whilst we don't want to turn mental health conversations into an HR issue, HR departments do have a place in being able to support those people, but also having a reputation as an organisation or as a business that is open to suggestion and and ready to go with making the best out of the team that they've got. So I think it's more about that for me.
Thank you very much. We don't have any other questions that have come in via the Q&A. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask that's come up from the conversations we've had now? There is an opportunity, as I said in the beginning, if there are questions that you have that you don't feel are appropriate to ask in this forum, then you can email those to us, and we can pick those up offline with Lisa, Nick and Joe. I'm just going to do a bit of a close. So while I'm doing this, if people do want to send questions in, they can. I have really enjoyed today, and I've got 3 words that I've taken away from today without trying to oversimplify it: to listen, to move, and to not try and fix everything. And I think those if we could all take those away and do them, and I think it's looking after ourselves as well when we're having a tough day mentally, to then be present for everyone else and having to be everything to everyone can be really tricky. So I think it's also just having the time to look after ourselves, which is really important. This webinar will go online, a recording of this webinar will go online. So if you want to share it with your teams or with other people that you work with friends and colleagues, please do, because I think there's some really good tips and ideas have come out from today. And I think as a Business First as an organisation, we're really lucky to have access to people like Lisa, Nick and Joe within our networks that we can make accessible to you and be able to give you this help and advice. All 3 of our speakers today are engaged with our Trading Through Coronavirus hub, providing blog content and tips and advice, and they will keep going. So keep an eye on social media, and because this is not a one-day conversation, it's a conversation to take forward and to kind of make part of our everyday life. So thank you very, very much to everyone for participating today. And we've had some questions coming. You see, I knew if I left people long enough, they would ask questions. So someone said thank you, that's lovely. And then someone has also asked, Laura Ross has asked, Nick, please could you share where you would signpost people to for help with recovery from trauma or increased anxiety?
Thank you. And again, great question, Laura. So there's some kind of higher level organizations that I am an ambassador or champion for, depending on their terminology. So Times Change, Mental Health UK, Mind have an urgent help button, but actually on a kind of a local level or more close level, that there are people that are solution providers from different kind of angles that I trust. So I've built up a network of people that have either been part of my own recovery or people that I know that I've referred people to previously and have done an amazing job. So for me, it's all about knowing the individual involved, and again, all comes back to culture, how best to kind of refer them from a cultural perspective, who would work best for them, and also from a solution point of view, what would work best for their character as well. But that's kind of non-exclusive really, and I was chatting to Joe last week about, so I'm always expanding my network of people, so it's always good to have those kind of people around you. So in essence, Laura, what I would say is to get to know the big organisations. So Mental Health UK, Mind have an urgent help button on their website as well, and Time to Change, people like that. But also on a local level, just surround yourself with people that are really good, that you can trust, and that would carry your reputation as an employer, as a friend, as well as you would.
Laura, I've unmuted you, mainly just to see that that has that answered your question. Have you got any, do you want to ask anything else related to your question?
No, that's really helpful. I'll have a look at the main organisations that Nick's mentioned. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Laura. No worries. My pleasure.
Thank you. And I think that's it. Again, thank you all very much. I hope you found today useful. We do really value your feedback. So if you have any comments or suggestions or feedback for us, do send them in. I will be sending out a follow-up, as I said in the beginning, and with information on our speakers, and also information on the webinar that Westport are running on physical activity and mental health, which I missed the one last week, so I'm going to go to that. So do go along. So thank you all very much, and I'm going to say goodbye, and hopefully we'll see you all online again soon. Thank you.